Welcome to this serial presentation for September 2022. So let's start with those two first images taken in Gruyères, which is a region in Switzerland where they make this cheese that is world known, which is Gruyères. It's at basically the border between the German-speaking part of the country and the French-speaking part of the country. And that was me trying to test a lens I hadn't used before, which was the Leica APO Telyt R 280mm f2.8, which weighs about 2.8 kilograms, which is pretty heavy, less than 6 pounds, but not far from. And I used it on an SL2 body, and I wanted to see how that rendered. So that's a vintage collector propeller plane presentation, which is named Rio 2022, with lots of incredible planes and beautiful scenery. And yeah, this lens really doesn't disappoint. It was produced, I believe, between 1992 and I think I have some notes, 1984 and 1996. And yeah, not much to say besides it really renders the Leica look. Not really any negative downside. Definition is just incredible. Even more so on this 47 megapixel sensor. I didn't even need the image stabilization. The lens doesn't have any, but I forgot to turn it on the camera. But it was a really luminous day, so I'm actually taking pictures at above 1/10, under 1/10 of a second, 1/10,000th of a second, sorry. And the two first pictures were non-cropped. The one on the left here is not cropped, so you can really see the rendering, the color rendering. And the one on the right is basically half. It's cropped at the half of the size vertically, so basically 1/4 of the surface. And yeah, everything's in full detail. You can actually see the pilot's face details, and the pilot actually. I sent him the picture. He really highlighted the fact that it was funny to see him. He didn't see himself full speed like that with so much detail. He's actually passing by really full speed. But again, this lens has some incredible bokeh, very smooth, very dreamy, but the precision is just phenomenal. No visible color distortion. It's the lens is really heavy, so taking pictures the whole day means you have to be physically prepared and have some water. And when it's so warm, like on this sunny day, yeah, think about it as a sport event for yourself, a sport exercise. But as you can see, even on close-ups for portraits or details, the bokeh is just incredible, and the color rendering. That's where you can also see the color science from Leica on their lenses, and also probably on the SL2 for the sensor and the electronic sensor. Really makes wonders. If you go see on the rio.io website, you'll see other pictures. And one thing that really surprised me is, to me, the colors were quite like this. But I was probably the only one with this kind of equipment. And the other colors were more punchy. And I felt they were more natural than what there were plenty of really incredibly talented photographers too, but none had the color rendering. So yeah, I was pretty pleased with this equipment, and very interesting day. Then those two next pictures, we're changing place. We're going to Iceland, as I'm often there, and that's using an M240 rangefinder camera with probably 90mm Summarit-M f2.5 lens. Again, I've talked about it in earlier presentations. When you travel, try to think about where you're going to sit. It can make a difference if you like taking pictures, and that's getting in Iceland, and you have the south of Iceland on the left picture. Those mountains we see, there's probably, I guess, that's probably somewhere around there where the last volcano eruption happened. And on the right, that's I feel a cool view of the city of Reykjavik. You basically have the whole center of the city in this shot, where you can see basically how it's built and the bay on front of it, and those sceneries and the geography in South Iceland, southwest. That's again in Reykjavik on a very rainy day. Found interesting. There was a military exercise, I guess, going to happen somewhere. So you had plenty of those big Navy battleships. The one on the left was kind of waiting in the bay, the Reykjavik Bay. That's actually the Bremen. It's a Bremen class frigate, but it's actually the Bremen. I think it's the largest ship of its kind in the German Navy. It was quite impressive in that kind of light. And on the right, that's the Icelandic Navy in the bay. I think the German ship was waiting for some space to join them. That's just in front of the Harpa Conference Center. Again, I'm using on this trip. I've been using the Summarit-M class lenses. Again, on the left, Reykjavik Marina. By sunset, those lights you get in Iceland, those clouds, the skies really and the weather really changes very fast. Very interesting country in that sense, and the sun is always pretty low, so you get those really strong contrasts and really strong colors, like you can see on the right picture, and that's looking towards the northwest. It was a very warm, really nice sunset on that day. Again, I was talking about the Harpa Conference Center, which is in the center of Reykjavik, and a very interesting construction made by the Henning Larsen. They're Danish architects in collaboration with the Danish-Icelandic artist Olafur Eliasson, whose actually workplace is near the marina in the Gondi neighborhood, which is basically the harbor in the center. But a very, very nice construction. It was built before the economical crisis at the beginning of the century, but it's a really beautiful place to go into and to discover. You don't need to take pictures. It's actually a really great place to take pictures, obviously, but just you don't need to take pictures of everything. Just enjoy the place. The place is really phenomenal to look at. Again, those on the left, that's reflections outside of the building. This building really plays with light, and yeah, an example of what you will see reflecting on the benches on the ground around. And on the right, it's simple. Just I like the colors of this picture. It's the kind of plants you can find in the city at that period of the year. And again, leaving Iceland, again emphasizing your sitting position in the plane. That's early morning, south coast of Iceland, and you can really have some interesting points of view. And if you just wait, look at it, be careful, you can actually, that's the same, you can see that it's the same place. The plane is still pretty low. It's 10 minutes after takeoff, 10 to 20 minutes after takeoff. But just look at what you see and go for it. But you've got some really, really cool things to take pictures of in Iceland. Now we're switching to something completely different. I think taking photos, I don't think you should take photos all the time. I mean, if you have stories to tell, I mean, photography, at least to me, is not the only pretext. The pretext of photography is to live things and to experience things and see things differently and share it. But I still think it's like a muscle. You have to practice your photography. So those two pictures actually represent my daily practice. That's in my kitchen. The left picture is with that's medium format. That's a Leica S006 camera. It's a pretty old camera with a CCD sensor made by Kodak. And I'm using here a Hasselblad lens because it's nice. And Leica made an official adapter for those lenses, and it's on the left. It's a 110mm f2.0 lens, which is better used for portraits usually, but I wanted to see how flaring worked on it. I wanted to practice a bit, and so yeah, that's my kitchen sink. And on the right, I tried multi-exposure with some burned paper and tried to experiment a little bit with matter and a square format that's cropped from the original 3:4.5 ratio of the sensor. Again, experimenting. I like those relatively old digital cameras, which are the medium format S series. They're pretty cheap secondhand, and you can adapt incredible lenses. And here I was just experimenting with really long exposures and very small apertures. So you can actually see all the imperfections of the sensors, the dust, like you would on a not really well taken care of film. But I think it's interesting to try it. And long exposures doesn't mean automatically that you have to do something that's super in focus. That's handheld. The picture on the left is actually a picture of one of my pictures I have on one of my walls. I wanted to try to do something and see what came out of it. And the right is just, blinds on a window. But trial and error, experimenting, flexing the photographic muscle. It's all about that. Those two next pictures, that's going somewhere else. London, different equipment. That's a Leica M240 camera again, but the Summilux 50mm f1.4 type 3 lens, built between 1992 and 2004, I believe, and used full aperture, which kinds of gives hollows in contrasty zones of the pictures. At first on my camera, I'm not used to use it, so that was really a practice for me to see what I could do with it. I saw it on the viewfinder, on the camera's screen. I thought my pictures were really blurry or my lens defective, but actually, if you look at those two next pictures, that's low light using the same lens. There's this weird, at first hollow, but the definition is there. You have some really good detail even in the hollowy, the phantomatic parts of the image. And actually, I find this rendering pretty great. I kind of got used to it. Have practicing your equipment sometimes it's like brushes. You discover new techniques and have new ideas. Again, those two pictures, looking at the bokeh of this camera, doing some candid photography. I found this lens super interesting to use, actually. And the rangefinder cameras are really quite discreet. They're compact. The M240 is actually an old camera from Leica, but it's super compact and it's got a fantastic battery autonomy. Basically, I never recharge in the 4 days in London, so it's a very electricity. How do you say? It doesn't consume much. It's a great camera in that sense. You can also see on the right side that the sensor is kind of old. I pushed the low lights, the image on the right, on the bottom right. You can see the grain. It's got actually an interesting grain. The sensor has got an interesting grain, which we can see in those two next pictures. When you push the low lights, the color often goes to greens or cyans. But here, combined with this interesting rendering of the Summilux, I think it works for me. It definitely felt like this when I was there. So a good restitution of the feel of the place. And those halos, it's interesting because it's like if you had a superimposed, two images are superimposed, one hollowy and another one very well defined. So very interesting lens, in fact. I will definitely use it more. And I understand now why people use it and look for it. Again, two pictures with the same equipment. On the left, you can see the cat's eye effect. That's full aperture. And this really dreamy, soft bokeh, creamy bokeh. and on the right, the details of a door. Yeah, and the color rendering is really nice too on those lenses, on this lens. Kind of hard to use on those two pictures when you have to get the hold of it, because this halo effect in highlights, for example, on the left picture, it kind of feels disturbing at first. But if you know what comes out of the lens, then yeah, I think it works. And as you can see, even so, the geometry is not perfect. There's a small horizontal and vertical lines distortion. Works well, and yeah, and again, the rendering is really very special, but very, very comfortable to the eye. And here's those two last pictures for this presentation. Again, London. Great lens overall for that kind of travel. And London is highly recommended. I don't know if London needs my recommendation, but it's a great place for street photography, or simply to enjoy the culture, the people, and actually not to take pictures, just to enjoy the moment. Never forget to, it's the places you enjoy in real, at best, that you will take better pictures of. It's not just by multiplying pictures, it's just enjoying the place and falling in love with the scenes too. Or just be a little bit attracted to the scenes to start saying, oh, I'm going to take a picture. Anyways, hopefully you found this presentation enjoyable, and see you next time.